Today we are back with another meta report, but this week we got a lot more data. So therefore we're going to show some charts, kind of discuss what the metagame is looking like, definitely the top cut variants of it. We also hosted our own tournament. I'm going to kind of talk about that a little bit and kind of break down overall of what that entire event looked like. Really cool thing about the metagame so far is that we've had 3 CCQs, really big events of 200 plus players in there. We've had a couple events of like 50 plus players, and then a couple trickling around with 35 plus players that I just wanted to put a little light on because at the end of the day, we can't all have CCQs, but we need to support those local game stores. So with that, let's look into the chart. Let's break down the data and kind of see what is being successful so far in Disney Lorcana. Let's get into it. So you can see here the week 2 top cut meta breakdown. Amethyst Steel mid-range coming in at 25 decks so far in top cuts, 23 for Sapphire Steel Control. Emerald Sapphire Control with 15. Amber Emerald Aggro sticking up for the Aggro decks and coming in with 10. Amethyst Sapphire Dumbo coming in with 9. Amethyst Emerald creeping in with 3. Amber Emerald creeping in with 3. Amber Steel Aggro living on a thread with 1 and 1 Lonely Ruby Sapphire Shark. That is the breakdown. And again, this is from the first 2 weeks. The requirements I kind of put on it was 33 players or more. In those tournaments, we broke down the top cut decks that we could find and just evaluate to showcase what the metagame is looking like. 9 different decks so far in the metagame, hitting a top cut in some fashion. A little bit more successful than others. Obviously, Amethyst Steel has picked up a big win. Sapphire Steel has yet to. Emerald Sapphire Control picking up wins. Amber Emerald Aggro picking up a win. Amethyst Sapphire Dumbo picking up a couple finals losses. Amethyst Emerald Control kind of sneaking into a couple bigger top 8s. And then, of course, Amber Emerald Circle of Life also sneaking around and making some top cuts. And these are decks that we're all going to be really excited to look at because those are the most new decks here. Sapphire Steel Control we covered a bit last week. The list we're going to be looking at today is the top 16 list from DKP, as he's put a little bit of an innovation on there from the World Champion. And then we're going to be looking at some different decks that we haven't really seen so far in Ruby Sapphire Shark picking up his top 16 this past weekend, and Amber Steel Aggro having some success as well. We're also going to include one final deck. There's a big top 32 for an Sapphire Amber Princess deck, and you got to include it. It's in a CCQ, long tournament, big round, finishing in the top 32 with that type of deck, and it's a new type of archetypes. It didn't make the top cuts kind of section, but it is something that we're going to be covering at the end of the video. So if you're looking forward to it, just check in the timestamps and go check out the princesses. But nonetheless, as you can see, what this metagame is starting to develop now, it's pretty well spread. You know, there was a 5-deck metagame, a star metagame in Fabled. Right now, it's showcasing that like there's 5 decks that are having the most success, but you have a couple decks that are hanging out, making it 6 or 7 decks that have the potential to maybe come out and win a tournament early in the Whispers in the Well metagame. For me, I think that's really healthy. I think there's a lot of going on. I think there's a lot of true deck construction. And while we're not going to look at every single deck that was successful this weekend, the ones that we are going to look at, there are so many variations and choices that can go into this that makes them quite interesting. So with that, let's get into that first deck. We're going to take a look at DKP's top 16 deck. So here we have DKP top 16, the Madverse Barcelona CCQ 332 player event. DKP decided to go with Sapphire Steel. Now the Ruby Sapphire mainstead, won a DLC with Sapphire Ruby, of course, is now looking at what Sapphire Steel can do for him. And the one innovation that we can definitely see here is the Aerial Sonic Warrior. The Aerial Sonic Warrior being a 6-cost, inkable, 3 strength, 8 willpower, 2 lore, shift 4, and amplified voice. Whenever you play a song, you may pay 2 ink to deal 3 damage to chosen character. This is a card that was reprinted in Fabled from Ursula's Return, and in this particular list, there is only 11 songs, but DKP is dubbing this 3/8 body with 2 lore to be one of the more playable cards in the format. When you put this card into play on turn 4, you have the ability to kind of like really start doing some mean things on turn 5. The idea that she can sing every song in your deck is quite relevant. She has the ability to where if your opponent was thinking you were going to play into a spooky site and then you jam an aerial, and the next turn you're able to sing a strength or sing a Zeus and then pay 2 more to kind of remove another card from play. All of a sudden you don't really need your spooky sites in this instance. You just have this really big aerial with 8 willpower sticking around, helping you pick off the board piece by piece. I really like the inclusion, the addition there. It's also notable that having the 1 jump ahead adds the 9th ramp, because really all this deck ever wants to do is go 2, 4, 6, start dropping bombs on turn 4, whether it be Ariel, whether it be Tinkerbell, whether it be Goliath. All of those choices are so very good. Having the backup plans of a card like Namari is nice, but it's really not the plan that we want, because we just want to play Tipo or Sail on turn 2 and then play Cinderella on turn 3, following it up with the big bomb on turn 4. That's exactly what this deck is doing. It's exactly what I'm sure he did all weekend in the deck in itself. Top 16 finish is pretty impressive. This is a list that I do expect to keep getting innovated over the next couple weeks, because it just has a lot of really powerful cards in it, and it's doing a lot of really powerful things. Playing a 6-drop on turn 4 in the format is very good in any world where your Cinderella gets to, ready, sing a Zeus or sing a Strength of a Raging Fire, can really punish opponents early. And then once you start getting those bigger characters in play after you establish your 6 cost, then you just have Hades, Vincenzo, and the Headless Horseman to kind of finish out the game. Super well-rounded deck. Definitely finding some struggles early on. I think it's, it was supposed to be the predator of the format, but I think it's actually ended up being the prey of the format. Everyone kind of expects what it's going. It knows its game plan, so it's figured out ways to kind of work against it. So while it's had a lot of top cuts in big events and small events, I should say, where like it's finding home in some top 8s and top 16s in places, the real truth is that like it's having a struggle to find a win or to be like really successful and go and make big runs in tournaments. So shout out to DKP again for a great finish in Barcelona. Taking a look at TFM Melissa here, picking up the 3K win in the 69-player event that we hosted for the TFM 3K. And she is back on her bread and butter, the thing that she loves most, Amethyst Seal. This list is based off of the Frank Carson list from the week previously in the CCQ of 226 players, where Timothy Mouse and Tinkerbell Fast Flyer are really the mainstays here of understanding the metagame and position of the metagame. We talk about this very often in any discussion around Amethyst Steel is, hey, we have maybe 90 to 100 playable cards in the pool of cards that we can build this deck with, but what are the best 60? How do we position the deck? What is the point of the positioning of the deck? And that's exactly what's going on here, and a lot of the decisions being made around that. She spent a lot of games going on, 1 drop on 1, Timothy Mouse on 2, Fast Flyer on 3, Genie on 4, and just off to the races running on those play games with Timothy Mouse and Tinkerbell causing a lot of issues, followed up by Genie, of course, being a bit of an annoyance as well. Even into games where your opponent has Lexington, when you have Thunderbolts, when you have Strength of a Raging Fire, and you can finish off Lexingtons, that 1-for-1 trade doesn't feel as good. Obviously, if you get the 2-for-1 trade, it feels a little bit better for the Lexington, but it can leave a lot of damage kind of laying around. Also, a big stud in this format so far has been Cheshire Cat. The Cheshire Cat is the 3-cost inkable 3/4 with 1 lore. Boost 2, and it's a load of fun. Whenever you put a card under this character, you may move up to 2 damage counters from chosen character to chosen opposing character. This has a lot of fluid here because you have so many cards that just have damage laying around. Palace Guard, Timothy Mouse, your Cobras, your own Lexingtons. Demona is another card we can discuss in a second. Just so much damage laying around. Even the Cheshire Cat himself, and it's loads of fun. Just kind of gives you the ability to pick off characters for whenever you really want to. This is definitely an ability that has replaced Bell, Accomplished Mystic, in basically every way imaginable, just doing everything you want it to. The idea that Demona is also sitting in this list, she's just a 4-cost 4/6 with Challenger 2 and 1 more. She really is just stats. It's a card that I watched a lot of people play this weekend, and when opponents did them, they're like, man, like, how do I answer this? Notables here of the one-of fun ofs, but they're not really fun ofs. They're designed pretty well. Happy, White Rose, Demona, Thunderbolt, all these cards really have finding a home in this deck right now as you're trying to keep the position wide because there's so many good playable cards. Then the altar is so powerful. Being able to ink all of them is very important. So you just have a lot of options in this deck construction kind of across the board. So, of course, the thing to note here is that Melissa came out this past weekend. She won the event. It was a 7-round tournament cut to a top 8. She started 5-0, drew into top 8. The top 8 then split. but 2 players in the top 8 were playing for that bye. So it ended up being Melissa versus Orion playing for the bye. It's kind of a team bye thing where one of them was going to get it, one of them wasn't. And it is on the stream. The finals matchup there was Amethyst Steel versus Sapphire Steel. It'll be on the YouTube, probably be by the end of the week. So if you're looking for some of those games from that stream, thank you for watching the stream if you attended. But we're going to be getting all those videos on the stream as well. Now, if you're looking for even more information about this deck, then good news for you, Melissa updated our guide. So there you have it, the Amethyst Steel rotation guide. Melissa did drop another chapter in there. I had a chapter from last week that went in about the budget aggro burn deck that is pretty well positioned in the metagame. If Amethyst Steel is not running rampant, it can kind of get under pretty much everything else in the metagame. But this weekend, we also showcased what the Amethyst Steel mid-range was doing and how that can be successful. So Melissa followed up her tournament run with a breakdown of the deck and, kind of just going through card by card what the important pieces were and how she was successful along with her tournament report. We're going to be adding some gameplay review in there soon. So if you're an Amethyst Steel, main and you're looking for even more information, look no further than the Amethyst Steel dock rotation guide. Amethyst Emerald picked up the big top 8 this past weekend in Barcelona, the 322-player CCQ, and it did it with style. This list is pretty much an evolution of what we had seen last week from Mo Shamlin at the Sharp Gaming event, just kind of adding on the different unique styles that you can build this list, kind of just creating even more choices going forward. I really like the idea of Webby in the metagame. If you're going into a Sapphire metagame, Webby can really just pick up so many extra resources for you and create these moments in time that your opponent just can't interact with. Webby has Ward, Prince Philip has Ward. We discussed those things last week and how powerful they can be to set up your malicious, mean, and scary turns. Getting free ink along the way early because there's just not enough ways to interact with Webby for most Sapphire decks. Unless your opponent's going to take a turn off to put a Lexington into play, then your Webby is going to be able to quest probably at least twice, maybe even 3 times to get as much ink as your opponent is. And that's a really, really powerful thing to do. Not to mention when the 6-drop they play, on average, cannot remove the Webby either. Webby just ends up getting anywhere between 4 to 8 lore, sings a couple songs, gets you the extra ink. Like, it just does so many things in a lot of the Sapphire matchups that the card is very, very powerful. Another standout for me so far has been the Flynn Rider, the 1-cost 1/2 with boost that becomes a 3/2, which I think is awesome. Also a second lore. It's effectively an inkable bonsai for the 3/2 uninkable 2 lore quester that is the hyena. So it offers another nice little line there. But with this, the funnier thing that I love about the combo is what it does for the Madamim Elephant. I think a lot of people had Madamim Elephant stocks going down, but this list is kind of showcasing like, hey, this card's kind of good. It can kind of do the stuff that you wanted to do. And it really just adds another layer into draw to the deck, which is definitely, if we don't get our Clarabells and we're not hitting on them, then we can kind of fall behind as well. Hades, is probably one of the better cards in the format. It's just a card that's coming out. It's doing everything you want it to do. The 5-cost, inkable, 3 strength, 4 willpower, 1 lore with the ability What You Say. When you play this character, you may choose an opposing character. If you do, draw 2 cards unless that character's player puts that card on the bottom of their deck. Giving choices to your opponent is a consistent way to create points in the game where you can benefit from. And I think that no matter what Hades does, it ends up being great and powerful as long as it's getting rid of the problematic character. And when in doubt, even if it doesn't, you get to pick up 2 cards, which helps you kind of get away with that as well. So another big shout out here to the Amethyst Emerald deck. I know people are really hyped trying to find new archetypes in the metagame to break through. This is a deck that I played some games with last week. It's pretty fun. It's really interesting, and it just creates very difficult moments for your opponent to kind of interact with you. So definitely worth picking up and trying out. Emerald Sapphire did take a bit of a dip this week. We were looking around the meta and trying to find what the better decks were from the past weekend, and a top 16 finish in our 3K, finishing 5-2. Reverb here, big shout out to him for coming out and supporting the event. But here you are, we're still making some choices with this deck as well. As very similar to Amethyst Steel, I feel like this list probably has 80 or 90 playable cards. So trying to find the best 60 is become kind of a good question around what's going on. Bend to my will is a conversation that always happens. Is it the type of card that you need? Do we need the 9th ramp? Like, is that important? Develop your brains. What are we doing with them? Basil, is that card doing well? There's detective versions of this deck with Judy Hops. There's still versions of this with Pleakley. There's versions without Cinderella. So I think this is going to become, really right now, we know that what this deck is doing is powerful. We know it might be the most consistent Prince Philip deck, and kind of like what can that be good for you in the metagame. But it seems to be finding a little bit of an issue trying to close out tournaments. Obviously it won the week 1 CCQ, but in week 2 it did not feel as powerful. And specifically in a world where it won a big CCQ, you would thought there would be more of it played, and that really didn't happen either. So there has to be some inconsistency layers to this deck, and it's going to be really curious in how it develops over the next several weeks. For me, I think the number one question that I keep finding myself is Spooky Sight it? Is it the card? I think that Spooky Sight is a wonderful card to exist in the metagame because it creates these moments in deck construction that as an aggro deck or as a mid-range deck, you have to decide, how am I going to compete with that card? What kind of cards am I going to put in my deck that answer this card in a way? And I think that there was way more answers to Spooky Sight and like the kind of the gameplay built around it than Spooky Sight players thought there would be. So because of that, I'm actually starting to wonder if like Spooky Sight existing is good enough for you to just not play the card, because your opponent right now, if you're going to a tournament this weekend, I think there's a CCQ in Las Vegas, like maybe this is the weekend where you're like, I'm going to pull my Spooky Sights. We're just not going to play them. We're going to make our opponents think we're playing them, but we're just not going to. And then you just jam some other 6-cost character that's like good and beneficial to the game. Because in my experience in testing in the first 2 weeks, Spooky Sight has probably been one of the worst cards. And I mean that through like every deck that I'm playing with it. I just don't care about the card anymore. I'm playing cards that just interact with it much better. I'm playing like a deck that can benefit from being Spooky Sighted. So with all of those things, yeah, I think it's a good couple of weeks right now. Teeter-totter around, get rid of them, fill that spot with something else a little bit more impactful. And kind of just like what DKP did, where he played the aerials in his Sapphire Steel. I think that's like a really good way to do that. Maybe I would even look for another song to include in my deck. This way you can get even more benefit out of the aerial. Just kind of thoughts of like looking at like ways to build the deck without the card. So nonetheless, I think Spooky Sight, big down for me. 124 players this past weekend in Prague, and top 8 found a Amber Emerald Circle of Life dogs list. And there are 2 different versions of this deck right now going out there. There might even be 3 different versions of this deck going on out there, if I'm being completely honest. So if you were looking for different versions of, Amber Emerald, there's going to be a lot of options out there for you. But this is a really cool and unique way to do this. Circle of Life is one of the cards that was printed in Fabled that didn't get a whole lot of love in the Fabled metagame. But now we're finding different ways to kind of make that happen because of Prince Philip, because of Malicious Meaning Scary, because of like all the really cool cards you can interact with this one. So this is definitely a list that's coming in, and it's showing you the best of both worlds of like, hey, I can be this this really good aggressive deck, but when in doubt, I can also turn my card sideways, sing Circle of Life, and drop a big character into play as well. I think that's a really nice and unique play style to the metagame. So huge shout out here to Mattias for picking up the top 8 in the CCQ. One of the nice cards that I see here is Dale. So Dale, the Mischievous Ranger, is the 4-cost inkable, 3 strength, 4 willpower, 1 lore with nuts about pranks. When you play this character, you may put the top 3 cards of your deck into your discard to give chosen character -3 until the start of your next turn. So that interacts with both of our big songs. It interacts with Circle of Life because it can put a Circle of Life target into the discard pile, so then we can sing and bring it back and gain benefit that way. But it also interacts with Under the Sea, giving a character -3, and then singing Under the Sea can probably get rid of some of the more problematic characters in the format that you don't want to deal with. Looking at you, Dumbo, as a starter. But nonetheless, I think that it's a nice little way to kind of interact with both of those cards. Nice little standout. A little bit, for me, a shout out to Chippendale. I like the Chippendale Floodborn character a bunch if we're going to be playing cards like Dale itself. The other big card I want to shout out is the Tramp. I think that the Tramp Dapper Rascal right now more than ever is a great response to a lot of the metagame. The 6 cost, Inkable, 2 strength, 8 willpower, 2 lore with shift 4, and play it cool. During an opponent's turn, whenever one of your characters is banished, you may draw a card. It is an effective library, if you may. It's a pretty cool card that, interacts where on your opponent's turn, makes them a little more lenient to kind of banishing your characters. It obviously gives you a shift target from your 2 to your 4. In any world where you ever have to like bounce that back to your hand, you get the the effect of the tramp again, which is really nice. But this also just is anti Prince Philip. The idea that your opponent, a lot of cases, are trying to set up these massive board wipes. Well, now they got to figure out a way to answer your 2/8 before doing that. Otherwise, they might banish your board, but you also might draw 4 or 5 cards and just be able to start over again. So I really like the Dapper Rascal in the metagame right now. Aside from that, this is a pretty straightforward aggro list, just complemented by another couple songs in the form of Circle of Life and Malicious, Mean, and Scary. Shout out again to the top 8 finish in the CCQ. Now we have the winner of the CCQ in Barcelona, straight up playing dogs. Got to give a shout out here to Shorty because he gave us a nice shout out. Shouted out our guides. Thank you so much, sir. But this is a list here that's just kind of going through, the trenches here. What I want to note here is that we do have the 1 cost Webby, but we do not have, the shift target, which I really think is cool. I think it's enjoyable because Webby is a pseudo replacement to Merryweather, but shout out to Shorty here. He thinks the Webby is so good that he's also still playing a Merryweather. So that effect that comes in and buffs a character is very, very powerful to Shorty and kind of creating these games, because now when you play this character, chosen character gets +1 strength. So now we know, of course, with the Lady Decisive Dog, basically when you played a Webby, the Lady would give itself +1 in strength, and then the Webby would give it another +1 strength, so that's going to +2. So now it makes it a little bit easier to play 2 characters on turn 2 that then trigger your Lady, and you're off to the races, gaining 3 lore or getting to those correct numbers that we're looking for. This would also enable a way to kind of like buff Lady to the moon with the Webby plus a tramp, of course. So a lot of really interesting things to do around getting strength on your Lady, which is very nice. All in all, I think that this is a really straightforward deck again. We're kind of back to deciding like, hey, what is better, Emerald Chromicon or Under the Sea? I do think in a world where there's more Amethyst Steel, if Amethyst Steel is going to be the, maybe de facto best deck in the format, then having a card like Emerald Chromicon might be a necessary evil. But I also, heard of this weekend one of the better dogs players in the format playing against Melissa in round 3 or round 4, and they got 2-0'd, and Emerald Chromicon was completely useless. So I still am on, that team of that. If you're playing Emerald Chromicon, I really think that it's a skill check more than anything. I think that you can make really bad players play worse because of a card like Emerald Chromicon. But I think the best players just understand how to play around that card, or just understand where they are in the game to whether or not how to utilize it. And taking 3 off on your, on a turn for this deck is really difficult, because if you don't get benefit out of the Chromicon in a way that makes sense to your game plan, then you actually start falling behind in the game against basically every deck in the format. The other big note here is that there's a lot of Emerald decks running around, and it's kind of free to play Clarabelle 1 in most cases. So you might take a turn off to play Emerald Chromicon, not get any real benefit from it, and then they might just be like, oh, whatever, I'll just pay 3, I'll put a Clarabelle into play, and I'll banish it. And now you took that whole turn off, didn't threaten the game at all, and they were, they're already on 6, 7, 8 ink probably. So like them taking 3 off to banish the item, establish a card in play, and then play another threat like a Cinderella or a Donald Duck, all of a sudden their turn is magnificent, and your turn is like, oh man, I can't believe your turn took off for it. So I'm still like really about the Emerald Chromicon, but that's kind of just life. That's just how I feel about it. I'm really, really worried about telling people that it's correct, even though I do know it makes the Amethyst Steel matchup better. I'm still kind of on team it's a skill check, and the only time it's really good is if your opponent is really bad. And I don't like to promote cards like that, in my humble opinion. So again, shout out to Shorty here. Thanks for the big shout out on his X page. Definitely go give him a follow if you can. Gotta love seeing the dogs get success, even in the Whispers in the Well metagame. That's a big improvement, because people were worried about it. People were thinking like, oh, it's Dem, it's doomed. It's going to go out. It's going to go out of business. What are we going to do? Listen, Spooky Sight's not scary because we have Mowgli and Ursula. We get to see and prepare for everything. Having more shift targets is nice. Having the ability to put bigger characters into play, easier. It all ends up being fine. If you get Spooky Sighted and all of a sudden you're just playing your Lady Park Avenues, which are 4/4s, getting cards back in the discard pile anyway, I think Dogs is in a great position, and the meta report showcases that it's the best aggro deck in the format right now. And of course, in Lizard Kitty we trust, if you're looking for more of an update, Lizard Kitty did play this to a top 8 in our second event this weekend. That's right. She went in and to win with Amethyst Steel, and then she played Emerald Dogs the next day, playing it to a top 4 finish as well. So we're going to be updating Emerald Dogs this week as well. So again, if you're looking to support us on Metafy, no better place to do it. This is a great way. It's a great option to you to help, get yourself better at Disney Lorcana, but also support us in the best way. Metafy is our best sponsor by far. So by going there and getting a part of that, buying these guides, supporting us is a big deal. So thank you for all those that have purchased so far. And if you're looking to understand a deck better, definitely check the pinned comment below and the link in the description. Check out our guides. Buy one that really suits you to the best of your ability. Amber Steel, not dead. Top 8 in a 322 player CZQ in Barcelona, and it really is bringing some interesting cards. A couple weeks ago, we showcased the Rapunzel in a really, low to the ground princess variant that did not have Tiana, but now we're seeing a version that does feature Tiana, which I kind of love, because I will say when I played that deck, I felt like I was missing the Tiana in a big way, so it's nice to kind of get that card back now. The Raja, the 3-cost, 3/4 bodyguard, does play pretty well with Rapunzel and Alani because giving it support can kind of enable you to banish something if you want to, but also puts it in a position that it doesn't take damage. You can do this multiple times as well. You can, quest your Alani, protect your Raja. Raja can take out a character, and then you can quest with your Rapunzel and give it another bubble. So when you on the kickback, your opponent might not have a way to do damage to the cat and then also kind of get through to your characters. Aurora is still a really messed up card, and adding princesses to the deck so you can do even more unfair things on average is a pretty big deal. So I think this deck is really threatening. I think it really is low to the ground, and it does ask your opponent to kind of answer things really quickly. I do want to talk about the Mickey Mouse, the Amber Champion, for a second here. So Mickey Mouse Amber Champion is the 4-cost inkable, 2 strength, 5 willpower, 1 lore. It has 2 abilities. Leading the way, your other Amber characters get +2 willpower and friendly chorus. While you have 2 or more other Amber characters in play, this character gains Singer 8. Now, the Singer 8 is not as big of a deal because you only have Strength of Raging Fire, and I Won't Give In. Shout out to Zootopia 2 coming out this week or next week, so definitely check that in theaters. But yeah, so these are the 2 cards that we're singing, which isn't, it's not like we're playing Beyond the Horizon or anything crazy. We're just saying like, oh, we're just going to activate Singer 8. But the real truth is we're just activating the Rapunzel's Tower effect of giving your other Amber characters +2 willpower. Giving a Daisy Duck 6 willpower is kind of crazy. Giving a Tiana 6 willpower is kind of crazy. Giving your Raja 6 willpower is kind of crazy. Like, you're just creating these moments where your opponent is going to have a really, really tough time interacting with you. And I think that's a big deal. Even making Mowgli a 1/4, that quest for 1 that like banished or made your opponent discard a card is a big deal. I really think that this Mickey Champion has a good opportunity early on to like play a threat to the metagame. Of course, the biggest issue is that it does not solve the under the sea issue, but hey, that's what Mowgli's for. That's what Pete's for. As you can see, this deck is running 4 and 4, giving you some options. The other real cool card that I have no idea if this card is good or bad, but I do love me some discard in the format. So search for clues. The player or players with the most cards in their hand choose and discard 2 cards. If you have a detective character in play, gain a lore. In this particular list, I don't think we have any detective characters, which is notable that it does not matter. Yeah, I don't think so. I think I just took a quick second glance here. I don't see any. So no detectives, which is fine because you're just looking to basically this be the last card that you play. So if this is the last card that you play, that means your opponent will always have the most cards in their hand, and making them discard 2 cards could be the difference of, getting a Malicious Mean and Scary. It could be the difference of getting Spooky Sighted. If you really go kind of like all gas, no brakes, then you just get to be like, hey, I'm gonna, play 3 or 4 characters in the first 3 turns, and then on my 4th turn, I'm gonna say, hey, you're gonna discard both of the cards left in your hand and kind of be low on resources or out of resources, and then be playing off the top deck. Well, you just, really got so far ahead because of the characters that you're able to play early on in the game and really pressure the game that way. So I think that this card could have some legs for sure in an aggressive mindset deck like this. Aside from that, this is basically still Amber Steel aggro. Nothing crazy here has changed. The I won't give in is, in a way, kind of like playing more copies of Nala and more copies of Mowgli and more copies of Doc. Like, that's basically the way that I look at this card, is that it just getting it back. It means that, like, my Nala costs 4, my Doc costs 4. Maybe you sing this, but it's very unlikely that you ever sing this because you don't want to give up lore. So, interesting card to add. With it, I would consider, like, maybe trying to find more one-ofs. I think is kind of important. Like, just play a Sleepy or something like that, just to have the, like, the outlet to, okay, if I need to get a 2-cost bodyguard back just to protect my characters and make it a little bit more annoying, that's what I would do. So all in all, shout out to Timo here, getting a top 8 finish in the 322 players CCQ, and definitely giving the Amber Steel players out there something to look forward to, and hopefully finding some nice cards like the Mickey Mouse and the Search for Clues as ways to interact with this current metagame. Now we have Sapphire, Amethyst, Dumbo back, but this time we have found a way to fit in the Junior Woodchuck Guidebook, which is that new item that we talked about, which is, pay 2 to play this, pay 1 to banish it, draw 2 cards. It's kind of like a pseudo Friends on the Other Side, but it's not close because you still have to pay 3 instead of being sung. This list, while featuring the Cheshire Cat, still has 3 accomplished mixes. Having 6 1-drops, I think, is really intelligent to the metagame. It just helps you interact with some of the more annoying cards early on, which is, I think, a really big deal here. 3, that's right, count them, 3 Monstros still going around. Also 2, I really do like the 2 Magical Maneuvers. I think that this is one of the better decks for Magical Maneuvers. I think there's a lot of decks that are kind of looking to play setup and saying, like, hey, I'm going to find some answers here, and this is like a good way to kind of like get around that, kind of pick up your better characters later in the game. Right now we're watching, Clarabelle's draw a million cards. We're watching Prince Phillips kind of just banish a million things. So if you're the deck that can have, Hades, 5 and Hades 7, being able to pick up your Hades after saying, like, hey, did I draw 2 cards, or did you banish a card, or, like, did you put a card under? That's a pretty good choice because you can kind of like really mess with your opponent that way. And then, of course, Hades' Infernal Schemer can also come back to your hand after putting something in the inkwell. Even picking up a Demona might be really fun. You might have drawn 3 cards, kind of annihilated the board, and then, just play to the board again, and all of a sudden you just pick up your Demona again and do it all over again. I think that that's really cool. Sudden Scare is definitely a card that I'd be looking at, the 4-cost Inkable, that when you play this, you basically put that character into the inkwell, and then put another card into the inkwell. What I've learned, this week in testing is that giving your opponent the extra ink with Sudden Scare, not really a big deal when you get into that later stage of the game. If your opponent just goes, Vincenzo, kill your thing, and then you're like, okay, well, I'll just Sudden Scare your Vincenzo, that means you probably took away their Beyond the Horizon target, which means now they can't sing Beyond the Horizon, so they have to like take a whole turn off to play Beyond the Horizon, and then in most cases, they're not going to have a follow-up, they're not going to do anything else. So, like, the extra ink that you gave them probably doesn't matter until way later stages in the game, where somehow they're getting to the point where they can just play, like, a 7 and a 6, but that just takes a very long time. So having this effective, let it go in a way in the format as a Sudden Scare action, it ends up being okay because so many people have so many threats, and there's also so many repeatable threats because of cards like Mam Elephant, because of Circle of Life, that all of a sudden you start creating these ways of saying, like, we're just going to get rid of this, put it in the inkwell, get it out of the way, have your extra ink, and hopefully they just can't benefit from it. But all in all, I think Sudden Scare is one of those cards that this weekend in our tournament, I think it was round 3 or round 2, where they were on stream, and Sudden Scare looked like an actual MVP played by Toby, who did not end up making top 8, but he had a really good start to the tournament, starting 4-0. But nonetheless, I think that's another card that you should definitely be up on. So down on Spooky Sight, up on Sudden Scare. Where is Ruby? It is right here. Top 32 finish in Barcelona in the 322-player CCQ. I mean, I don't think you can ask for much more. You just needed some life, right? We're talking about Amber Steel finding life. Well, this this is it. Finding life here in a top 32 finish with Ruby Sapphire. This is the most successful Ruby deck, I think, to the metagame so far. So I think that's really important to note that we're able to find it. We're able to find some way to utilize it. And while we're looking at this, we can see that, hey, Milan is quite good in the format. You know, your opponents basically have to respect it. With Xanatos and Medallion Weights, you might even be able to set up turns that your opponent don't even need to see the shift, because you can just put a Milan into play, Medallion Weights her, get the challenger going, and then banish, 3 characters pretty easily with Milan thanks to Xanatos. I will say I've seen this list also be played with Mushu's Rocket as another way to kind of get that off. Also it's very good with, of course, Xanatos is very good with Shark, so Mushu's Rocket's another card that you can kind of consider to do that as well. This is favoring the 3 Pirate's Life and 2 Dig Through Times, along with 2 Sudden Scare and 2 Spooky Sights. So we do have a pretty nice action base for our Maui Shark, which I kind of do love. We're also playing the Goliath, the 4-cost 5/5 with 1 lore, that whenever he challenges a character, or whenever a Gargoyle challenges a character, you get +1 lore, or you just get 1 lore for the turn, sorry. This is just a nice little card you can put into play with some stats. And yeah, I think that this is kind of what we expect this list to look like. And it's unfortunately very reliant on Maui Shark. Maui Shark is basically the best, quote, draw engine of this deck. While you have 4 develop, you have 4 visions, and you have like 4 sails. This deck is also playing the Robin Hood. That's a kind of a pseudo draw card. All of the cards really just read draw 1 card, or like replace this card for a hopeful better card. Dig Through Time does allow you to be a little bit more selective and give you an opportunity to find some of the best cards, but there's no natural draw, so it's hard to maintain cards in your hand as you're just sifting and playing most of the cards that you find. So that's been so far the consistency factor of Ruby Sapphire, and I think that might be just the true factor of the deck, but at least there's proof that's saying, like, hey, if we draw well, if we find the right cards, on average, if we can figure out the ways to answer our opponents, then this deck can find success in the metagame. Does it probably need some more layers of consistency? I would think so. Does it need some more like surprise factors? Also probably something that you should definitely be considering. So all in all, I think it's nice to see that it's not gone and that it does exist, because I know there's some Ruby Sapphire fans out there that are praying for this deck to break through into the metagame. And last but certainly not least, Emerald Sapphire, the top 32 in Prague. This was a positive record for this deck. It's also the best performing version of the Princess deck that I've seen in quite some time. I really just wanted to give it a few minutes to like, hey, this is possible. Don't give up. I also think this deck is very cheap right now, so it's certainly affordable. There was 2 versions of this in top 32. This version is kind of sitting around the 180. I think the other version was sitting around 120. So if you're just like looking for some princesses and you're looking to kind of be on a budget, you could definitely make this deck a budget-friendly deck. I think Ludwig is one of the best cards in Disney Lorcana that doesn't see any play. The 2-cost uninkable 1/1 with 1 lore with Superior Mind. When you play this character, chosen opponent reveals their hand and discards a non-character card of your choice, with also Lasting Legacy. When this character is banished, you may put this card into your Inkwell face and exert it. I think it's really one of those cards in Disney Lorcana that have just never had any love, because Amber Sapphire has simply not been good enough. And this card just feels so good. I love Mowgli right now, so if I love Mowgli so much, why wouldn't I play a card that does what Mowgli does, and on top of that, gets sent to my Inkwell? Huge, huge fan. All in all, I think that this deck is, again, if you just like princesses, if you just like want to be like pedal the metal ward, Alice is, the Savory Sailor is one of the best cards ever printed. She's just so powerful, creating moments for your opponent that are so very difficult to interact with. And now you get Rapunzel to like add a whole other layer onto the power level of the Alice. I think it's just doing a lot of really cool things. It's really pressuring opponents. If your opponent just doesn't have answers, they're going to be having a bad day, because there's just not going to be enough ways to interact with these cards. So huge shout out to here Boris in the top 32 at the CCQ in Prague. Week 2 meta kind of shaping up, really just showcasing like, hey, we're a couple weeks through. Amethyst Steel has been dominant. Sapphire Steel has been, top cut dominant, but not winning, not really finding even that many homes in top 8s. It's been kind of hovering around the top 32s and top 16s. Emerald Sapphire picking up a big week 1, but kind of having a drop off in week 2. Sapphire and Amethyst still around. Dogs still finding a lot of success, picking up a big win this past weekend. So as we're getting into, now the North American CCQs, it'll be really interesting to see what happens in Vegas. I think right now Vegas is like hovering around 150 to 170 players. And then, of course, we have CCS in a few weeks, which that's probably going to be around 300, 400 players. So we might, I don't know when the next CCQ is for EU, but I know there's a couple NA ones coming up over the next couple weeks, aside from the holiday and things like that. So really nice to see that. Our metagame was pretty well spread out. It was 25% Amethyst Steel, 25% Sapphire Steel, and then, trickled down to like 10, 9, 8, and then a little bit low for the other decks. But Steel right now seems to be the best thing because Amethyst Steel and Sapphire Steel are like the most played and most successful, which is just really an attribution of like how good the stats are in most of these Steel decks and how good really from like literally from the first ink to the 7th ink or even the 8th ink. There's just a Steel character that you can play on any one of those turns that is powerful and meaningful to the board or does something when you play it. And then you have Sapphire that's complementing it, letting you play those cards faster. Or you have Amethyst that like consistently keeps you up to par with cards in hand and different ways to threaten the game through evasive and things like that. So it's really interesting to see where we are in the metagame so far. It's nice to say like it's not really built really around Sapphire's spooky site, which a lot of people thought it would. It's not necessarily even built around the Emerald Malicious Minion Scary decks. While those decks have been successful, they're not the dominant decks in the metagame. So I still think there's some weeks for them to develop and some choices to be made. But all in all, where we are, I think, is very healthy. Having 9 decks hit top cuts in the first 2 weeks is very important, specifically in very large events. So shout out to all those players. Now, again, I want to just pitch one more time here, guys. If you are interested, I do have hours open for coaching. I got a session actually on Thursday morning, but I'm kind of open my calendar right now. We're in the off season for work, so I'm going to be having a lot more time for coaching. If you're looking to get better at this game, you have a goal coming up, we can even work on that. We can plan a goal for you and then set up a schedule on how you can kind of hit your goal. I'm a big goal person. If you haven't yet, check out the Lorcana Foundations Metafy guide. It's a free guide for us. It's Disney Lorcana 101. There's a whole article in there about goals and how to set them and kind of how to create things that are, impactful for you to make and not feel bad about if you can't make. So anything that you're looking for that, you're looking to learn for a matchup. I played more games of Whispers in the Well in the first 2 weeks than probably a lot of players have. Definitely on paper, on a table playing against Melissa and my wife Kylie. So it's been a lot of fun. I really do enjoy this metagame. I'm hoping that the meta reports are showcasing some of the different things that you can be doing and you can be building on. If you're not yet, hit up the Discord, get in the Discord, get involved. We're trying to get more active in there, do a lot more things. Lastly, I want to sell the Metafy Climber support tier on Metafy. We're going to be doing weekly roundtables. If you're looking to get a part of a specific discussion with myself, maybe some other members of TFM, we're going to be doing kind of like a weekly review of a game or a deck and just having an open conversation with our Metafy climbers. So if you're not a part of that tier gets you a lot of stuff right now. You get into that tier, you get every single guide we have for free. You get access to private Discord server or private Discord rooms where we have open discussion about the decks that we're playing, about the decks in the format that have been successful. And now we're going to be adding this weekly roundtable conversation to enable our climbers to kind of get into a voice chat and have a conversation about a matchup, about a deck, maybe some even metagame theory and all that stuff. So it's been a lot of fun. We're looking to support our climbers even more. So if you have not yet, check the pinned comment below. Join Metafy Climber subscription tier. Get access to all our guides for free, and then join the chat in the Discord. So thank you guys so much for watching this week, and we'll catch you in the next one.